All right. So we are up to 8 attendees on Zoom now. Almost as many as panelists we have tonight. So I wanted to start by thanking everybody for joining us tonight. We are here to talk about the Salem Street Area Utility Construction Project. I'm going to start with introductions of the project team. My name is Jen Mates. I'm the Assistant Town Engineer. Paul Vlasic will be joining us shortly as the Town Engineer. I also have Jay Perkins, the Highway Superintendent, and Matt Berube, the Water and Sewer Manager, on call with us. For the design engineers, Hoyle Tanner and Associates, Joe Ducharme is the project manager. Nicole Davis is the public outreach coordinator. Bill Davidson is going to be the senior construction advisor for the project, and Emily Belisle will be the on-site project representative. I also have Steve Haas and Raquel Gibson with us tonight. They were part of the design team. And then lastly, we have Jamco Excavators. Jamie Watkins is the owner. Todd Derby is the project development manager, and Herb Smith is the project superintendent. You'll see Herb on site all the time. So we've had a couple meetings about this project before. The very first one was just before COVID, so it was actually in person in the town hall, big open house we had. And then we had another follow-up meeting to talk about some of the progress we've made in the design and get feedback from folks. We went to the town meeting in March and got approved for construction funds for that. So we put the project out to bid over the summer, and now we're here getting ready to start construction for the remainder of this year, and then they'll be returning next year. So with that quick little update, I'm going to turn it over to HTA to talk about the rules of engagement to start with for the meeting, and then get into some of the project details.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, so tonight we're on webinar format for Zoom. So we are going to be holding all the questions until the end of the presentation tonight. So if you have questions, burning questions that are eating at you, feel free to type them in the Q&A section of this webinar. We will be answering questions from there, but if you want to speak, we will be asking that you raise your hand, and we'll track who's raising their hand, and we'll put the questions in order of who raised their hand first, and we'll start answering those at the end. So if you have any questions after tonight that we didn't answer and you forgot to ask, or maybe you think of it after tonight's presentation, then we encourage you to reach out to either Jen or myself, and we have our contact information, which will be shared in the presentation at the end. So we're just going to start off by talking about the communication of the project. So one thing to note is that we are going to be doing periodic public meetings similar to this format until the COVID restrictions are lifted, such that we could be doing them in person. These are recorded and they will be shared on the local access television. So if you miss it, or your neighbor missed it and they'd like to catch up on what was said, you guys can find us there. We will also be doing project updates on the town's website. So there is a page specific to this project that you can find the URL on the screen here. The town will also be doing periodic updates in their e-newsletter. So if you haven't signed up for that, we encourage everybody to sign up for that. And that will go to your email box. And then finally, as we have stated at all of the public meetings, we do have the ability to post in the Facebook group specific for this project. And we will be doing that periodically as well. So you may see some redundant messaging if you sign up for all of these, but we just want to make sure that everybody is staying as informed as possible throughout the duration of this project. Joe?
I think you're on mute, Joe.
Sorry, if you think I'd know by now after 18 months to unmute. My apologies. So as Jen mentioned earlier, we've had a couple of neighborhood meetings. The project has been, in the CIP for quite some time. This area, it's called the Tree Street area, is noted by a lot of the names in the neighborhood. the project that was envisioned by the town some years ago as part of the CIP is to make sewer improvements, water improvements, drainage improvements. And the extents you'll see on this slide in blue are really the extents of the work that's intended, the utility work locations. There are some areas such as Locust Avenue that will require a connection to a utility on Park Street. So there'll be some activity and some detours around those areas. But for the most part, the neighborhood lends itself to to allowing Jamco to execute their work and have traffic detoured around through other parts of the neighborhood. Always, obviously, with to keeping in mind access, local access, but individual access as well, in and out of your driveway. So, but this is just the overview. The streets in blue are the limits of the project. Next slide, please. And as some of you who might have been to the first or second meeting have seen, these are the existing utilities. This map or graphic comes off of the town's GIS mapping for the utilities. The blue water is somewhat hidden just because of the proximity to the other utilities in the neighborhood. The sewers in green, the drainage in this magenta color. In some streets, there will be sewer only replaced. In other streets, it might be sewer and water, and in some streets, sewer, water, and drainage. And some of that is based on other work that the town has done in the neighborhood over the years, where they may have already replaced a section or two of sewer, or drainage has been replaced, or maybe catch basins have been updated. But in general, the existing utilities throughout, there's water, sewer, drainage on virtually all the roads for this project, and as well as pavement restoration, which I'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about schedule. Next slide, please. Right now, Jamco has done a really nice job putting together a tentative construction schedule for the town. The focus this fall, because of the time of year, they're intending to focus on the sewer construction, which I think is really smart on their part. Mobilizing around the Columbus Day week, October 11th to the 15th, with construction starting the following week in earnest. And as we all know, and as Jamie and the folks at Jamco know, how long they are able to work this fall is really dependent on the weather. There may be some days that we have, Jamco has work scheduled and we get a weather event, they're not able to work. But in general, Jen and Nicole will keep everybody updated through the Facebook group and through the town's website as to what we expect construction sequencing to be. The construction anticipated this fall, say October 18th to about mid-December, weather permitting. The project had always been intended to have a winter shutdown, and with project completion in 2022. We did see from the schedule that Jamie and his staff put together, they intend to have 2 crews out there this fall working in the neighborhood on sewer work. And that should, again, I think that's a smart move on their part. That should expedite the work this fall. And in most cases, the sewer and several streets is the deepest utility. So again, that kind of makes sense to get that done first. Next slide, please. And now this is more focused. This slide, you'll see some areas, some streets highlighted in green. These are the streets, from the other slide, you saw the entire neighborhood. These are the streets that Jamco intends to focus on this fall. And that would be Locust Avenue, Warren Avenue, Hale Street, Walnut Street, a section of Salem, and a section of Forest, and a section of Oak Street. Again, it's weather permitting. The schedule they've put together is, I think, a good schedule to get them started on this work. And again, getting the deeper utility done sooner and early in the project makes sense as well. As I mentioned previously, on Locust Avenue, there is a connection to the sewer on Park Street. So Jamco will work with the town and with the police department, fire department. They'll likely have to close off access to Park and Locust at that end temporarily while they do a deep excavation to tie into a sewer manhole there. But throughout the project, we will have a tentative schedule posted on the town website. It'll be in the Facebook group. That will let people know what the intent is, understanding that, weather also will play a factor as to how the work gets accomplished. A couple of points on, while Jamco's out there, there's going to be noise, obviously, from the construction equipment, the trucks, the excavator. That is difficult to limit during active construction, and to the extent that I know Jamie and his crew want to, be productive, they're going to want to keep moving once they get started. So that's something to keep in mind. It will be noisy when it's in front of your house or at the end of your driveway. That will be temporary because the work on each of these are relatively short streets. The work on each street, shouldn't take an excessive amount of time, but you can expect, a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks in some areas, maybe 4 weeks in some areas, working down from one end of the street to the other. So noise, is certainly something you'll have to deal with. And perhaps as we get into the colder months, windows won't be open like they would be in the summertime. That may be helpful. But I'm sure, Jamie and Herb and Todd, his crew, they'll all, they'll do their best, but keep in mind, it is heavy construction. These are some deep excavations. It's going to be a little bit noisy. And on that side of it as well, particularly on Locust Avenue, there's a very of sewer there. We want to make sure that the residents, everybody is safe. Being around construction equipment and the crew, we want everybody to keep their distance. If you have questions, reach out to Jen and Nicole. Herb, who'll be out there for Jamco, may be able to answer a question here or there, but we really don't want to interrupt Jamco's crew. We'll have a resident engineer out there as well, Emily Belisle from Hoyle Tanner. She'll have a Hoyle Tanner vest on, so you'll be able to identify her. We'd like to keep the day-to-day communication limited with the crew so that we're not slowing the crew down. But also we want everybody to be aware of the safety issues with these deep excavations. And in some cases, the sewer utility is to one side of the street or the other, but in other cases, it's more down the middle of the road, which is the case for the end of Locust closest to Park Street. So, we want people to stay safe, stay away from the heavy equipment. Very difficult for an excavator operator who's working around utility lines, trees, crews, equipment, vehicles. They have a lot to pay attention to keep their eyes on. And we have to be, everybody has to be cognizant of the safety aspect of keeping their distance, from the crew in the active construction. So we'd appreciate everybody respecting that. And on the communication side as well, like I mentioned, Jen and Jamie and I will be talking, if not daily, weekly about the project as work progresses. Jamie and I have worked together before on projects. The communication and workflow is really important to he and his crew to be productive and keep the project moving. To the extent that we can all facilitate that, we'll do our best to do that so they can do their best job for the town. I do want to point out too on road conditions right now, the roads, some areas the pavement is in decent shape, other areas it's broken up a little bit. Because Jamco's tackling some of this work now, they will be trench patching rather than repaving. When the project is done, the streets will get repaved with a binder course of pavement. But heading into the winter months, and because Jamco's crew will have to get back into these streets later, in some cases for drainage, some cases for water, some cases for both utilities, we don't want to waste the paving. So the final paving won't be done until the project is done next year, but the trenches will be patched going into the winter this year to facilitate plowing and safe travel in the wintertime. We did also have, as part of the project, which the town made a strong point as we got into design development and got through the project. The town had us engage an arborist to come out and look through the neighborhood. There are some very mature, big trees, some of them very close to the edge of pavement, some of them offset from pavement, but with big crowns overhanging the road. So during design, we did consult with an arborist. We did put an allowance in the construction project, and I believe Jamie and Jen and others walked the site with the arborist on Monday. And the arborist will be out to do some selective limbing to clear some areas for Jamco's work. And then later in the winter months, when the trees are dormant, the arborist will come back out to the neighborhood and do any remaining limbing or pruning that needs to be done. And that arborist will work with Jamco throughout the project, whether there's any other work to be done in the spring or summer months next year when Jamco does the rest of the utility work. That winter pruning, from what we understand from the arborist, it's a very good time to do that when the trees are dormant. It also is done so it's out of Jamco's way when they come back. They're not overlapping or getting in one another's way. So I think that's a really nice approach the town's taken, and Jamco's embraced that collaboration with the arborist to do the best we can to protect the trees that need to be protected out there. On the construction mobilization that will happen the week of Columbus Day, that week of the 11th, there will be some areas designated by the town in that Park Street triangular park area. There will be some areas for Jamco to stage their trailers. They'll have construction trailers, a tool trailer. Also along the street, as they're working, they will need to place precast concrete manhole structures, lay down pipe. They'll do everything they can to keep those, along the edge of the road and safely out of the traveled way, but understand that there will be materials kind of moving along with Jamco's crew throughout the project. So for example, if you live on Locust Avenue and Jamco starts on Locust, which is the current plan, it's going to be busy, noisy. There'll be a temporary closure at the Park Street end for a couple of days, maybe 3. Then there'll be material staging as they do the sewer on Locust Avenue. And that as that passes by your house or your driveway, that disruption will be minimized, but understand that for Jamco's crew to be effective and efficient, they do need to move materials that they're using in the next day, 2, 3, into the neighborhood in those sections to get that work done. The town has provided other material laydown areas for bulk materials on town property. But just be aware, there'll be some equipment and materials that remain in the neighborhood or in that park area overnight. And then as that moves through the area, that will be diminished in front of your property. Let's see, on the schedule as well, I think I mentioned that Jamco intends to have 2 crews out there, and I believe the Locust, Hale, Warren area would get 2 crews to finish that area up, and then the 2 crews would move over to the Walnut Forest, Oak, Salem area. So there'll be, activity in one section of the neighborhood for several weeks or a month and a half, and then it's going to jump to another area of the neighborhood. And as I mentioned, the intent is to put a temporary trench patch down for the winter months so that plowing can be done safely, travel can be done safely, and then there'll be more activity in the spring. The winter shutdown as well. Typically, we would work with the town and with Jamco. If we may, I'm just going to, say we'll probably pick a date in the spring when we think the weather is going to be good, and update the schedule, provide a tentative schedule weeks or a month in advance to let people know the plan to come back out into the neighborhood. Again, that's always subject to change because of the weather. We've had some winters that have, gone by mid-March to late March, and construction crew can get back out right away in April. We've had other winters that have been prolonged, and that's been delayed. So understand with the winter shutdown, there'll be a period of no construction activity, and it will start up again in the spring. We'll set a date for that later, and we'll notify everybody what that date is when we set it. But again, that would be subject to weather. We've had snowstorms in May, which can be really disruptive as well. So just keep in mind, we do the best we can to lay out the schedule. I think Jamco's put together a smart schedule for this year, and to the extent the weather cooperates, I think they can get this work done. Jen, anything else to add that I might have forgotten on safety, communication? We want to keep the communication open, but go through the channels to the town and to Nicole.
No, I think you got it covered.
Okay. Next slide, Nicole. I'll let you take this, Nicole.
Thanks, Joe. So as a reminder, we do have the Facebook group. We also do have the town website, which indicates what the updates are. The project updates that will be shared on the town website, we will be summarizing those in the town e-newsletter, so you can get the correspondence that way as well. But in any case, if you have any questions throughout the duration of this project, we do encourage everybody to reach out to either Jen or myself, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have throughout the duration of the project. So with that, Jen, it looks like Bill Murphy has a question. He says, for properties that are on the corners of construction with 2 crews going, are only one road going to be worked on to allow access to the property? Joe, do you want to answer that, or maybe Jamie?
Can you repeat that, Nicole?
Sure. It says, for properties that are on the corner of construction with 2 crews going, are only one road going to be worked on to allow access to the property? Meaning if they're on 2 different roads that are being worked on at the same time, is there still going to be access to that property on the corner?
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So yeah, the intent is to keep one travel lane open at all times throughout the neighborhood to the extent that that's possible. And when I say the extent it's possible, I mentioned earlier, some utilities, just by virtue of either where they are now and being replaced in kind or where they need to be relocated, if they're in the middle of the road, that's going to get tricky, and we'll coordinate, we'll review the week-to-week schedule with Jamco, with Herb and Jamie and their crew. We'll try to avoid any situation that would create a pinch point where a street is blocked off on both ends. And if there is work on both ends, the intent would be that at least one end has one lane open for access in and out of that section of the neighborhood. Jamie, would you have anything to add to that? I know you've walked through that site a number of times now.
No, I would, I agree with what you're saying, Joe. Obviously, we want to make sure everyone can get to and from their houses. So, with our schedule again being tentative, there's flexibility in some of how we shift to allow access. Obviously, there will be detours on those streets, but we won't allow. We don't want to get to a point where we have anyone landlocked, so to speak. So we will, we'll work with the town and Hoyle Tanner to make sure that we go about our construction schedule as smoothly as possible.
Thanks, Jamie.
And as we stated at the beginning of the presentation, for anybody that joined maybe a few minutes late, is if you have any questions, feel free to either type them in the Q&A or use the raise hand feature, and we will unmute you and allow you to speak.
So if anyone has questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask now. You're a quiet bunch tonight. Folks are sad it was the last day of summer, I guess.
Hopefully we've answered all the questions with the presentation tonight.
Oh, there we go.
We have another one. Benjamin asks, are there any trees that will likely require removal entirely?
So my understanding is there are a couple of dead or very bad condition trees at the end of Locust Avenue, and those are actually in the town's right of way. Those are likely to be taken down completely. There may or may not be some utility work cross country in that area. I know the town is working on some easements with some property owners, but either way, those trees are dead and would present a future hazard to the utilities, overhead utilities in particular in the area. Those are the only, there's a couple trees there, and those are the only ones I know of that have been discussed that they should be taken down. That's not to say through the winter and next spring that there might not be another tree or two identified, but that's what we've seen to date.
And to add to that, when we walked through the project site yesterday with the arborist, we did look at the condition of the trees, and most of them looked very healthy. There were one or two that looked like they had been extensively pruned before or just are on their last leg, but our intent is to try to keep everything alive, which is why the arborist was engaged for this. So he'll be advising us along the way for not only limbing the trees, but any cutting of roots during excavation, and then possibly doing some fertilizer treatment at the end of the project to give the trees a little boost to their system so that they recover more quickly.
Sean made a statement that says, that was very clear. Thank you. I'm on Locust. Glad to know I'm at the beginning. So that's enthusiastic about the project. Sean, this is going to be a great project. We have Steve that has chimed in. He says, what measures will be taken for dust control during construction?
I'll start, and then Jamie, I'll ask you to chime in as well. We do have within the project, we have some requirements for dust control, which would typically be
water every day.
Be just water to keep the dust down. And Jamie, I guess I'll ask you to comment. As you transition into colder weather, you might switch dust control measures.
Yeah, so we intend to have a water truck on site. Ideally, ideally it stays above freezing until mid-December, but we all know that's probably not likely. So we will have a water truck on site as long as feasible, and then we'll switch to other methods. What I would add to that is, while there's active excavation going on, there will be dust created that will be somewhat out of control. The vehicular traffic, dust that's kicked up, vehicles, loaders, etc., going up and down the roads, that will, we'll have that, remediated with whether that's the water truck or other methods. But as that excavator is digging and we're backfilling, etc., there will be some dust created from that, but it should be very, minimal, of course.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yep.
Are there any other questions?
And if folks think of questions later, or you talk to your neighbors about this and they have questions, Nicole's gone through all of our contact methods already and the different outlets we have. So please feel free to reach out at any point before or during construction with any concerns or questions you may have. I know some people don't like chatting in a meeting forum like this, so that we can chat offline. That's totally fine. All right, DPW staff, did you have anything to add about this? Anything you think we may have missed that folks should know about?
No, Jen, I'm all set. I think
Thanks,
everything
Matt.
was covered pretty good. Let us know if we can do anything to help out the project, obviously.
Great.
Looks like we have another question that's come in from Bill Murphy. It says, I was told there was a stormwater tank somewhere on Oak Street. Is it known where it would be going? Roads being widened to what extent?
That sounds like a Steve Haas question.
You throw it to me. So let's start with the first question about the stormwater tank. So that will be an underground sand filter. And there's two of them on the project. One is on the corner of the Park Street Common area, but the second one on Oak Street, I'm just trying to flip to the plan sheet to give you the exact location. Give me 1 second. So that'll be on the corner of Oak and Salem, kind of on, as you're coming up Oak towards the north, it'll be right as you get to Salem Street on the northwest corner of the intersection. And it looks like, I don't have the property address. One more sec, see if I can change sheets here and find it. On the corner, 18 Oak Street is the corner. And then the second question was on pavement widths. So the goal is not to widen the roadway anywhere. It's actually to make them more consistent and in most cases narrow them to about a 24-foot total pavement width, edge to edge. In some cases where the roadway was already narrower than that, we will have some 22-foot roadways, which I believe is limited to Walnut Street. So anything to add to that, Joe?
If it's drainage, you got it.
Jamie, did you or Herb or Todd have anything else that you would like to add? Anything we may have missed?
I don't believe so. At this time, we're all here and been a part of the meeting. I think everything on our end has been touched on for sure.
Great.
Thank you.
We've got Mary D, who's asked the question, what is the plan for connecting water sewer from street to individual homes? Joe?
Yes, thanks, Nicole. That's a good question. The project, as it was put together, is to replace the services from the mains that will be in the street to the edge of the right of way. So, for example, the sewer work that Jamco will be doing this fall, they will have a mainline crew that comes in to do the mainline sewer in the street. They'll have a service crew that comes in to make those connections. So the main sewer line will be new PVC pipe. There'll be Ys or chimneys, whatever, depending on the depth of the sewer. There'll be a way to connect the building service to the new sewer, and that piping from the main to the edge of the right of way on either side of the street will be new PVC pipe with a clean out at the edge of the right of way. Similarly, when Jamco gets to do the water work next year, they'll be setting up a temporary water system in the neighborhood. We'll be working on details of that with Jamco so that that's well coordinated for next year. But once they replace the water mains in the street, there will also be new connections to the new main and new piping out to the edges of the right of way in both directions with a new water shutoff put in to make the connection to the existing house service at the edge of the property line or edge of the right of way.
I saw that Bill Murphy had his hand up, but it's down now. So Bill, if you still have a question, you've got time.
We will hop to Doris. It looks like Doris has a question. If digging is done on someone's property, will the property be restored to what it was? Bill, we will grab you next.
Yes, so if there's the work, the bulk of the work is within the town's right of way. If there's any encroachment on the property for any reason, if it's, for example, a grassed area, and say, for example, the sewer main or a connection is close to the edge of the right of way, certainly Jamco would restore anything that they disturb in that regard. There are 3 properties that the town is working on easements. If in fact, those easements are secured and there is work on those properties, those would be restored, to the condition that they are today. We did have, it's an excellent question too, because part of what Jamco has done and the town as well, and I know Nicole has done this for us, is photograph or videotape the neighborhood. So there's an understanding of what the resources are along the street. Because that is a more mature neighborhood with a lot of mature trees and landscaping, and the property lines and edges of the right of way aren't well defined on some streets. There are likely some features in people's yards that actually are on town property and within the right of way. To the extent that we can avoid those, we did during design. If they are being disrupted during construction, they will be restored. Jen, anything to add there, or Jamie?
Okay, Bill Murphy.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm the property that the storage tank is going to be put on, well, on the outside of it. Who would I reach out to discuss more of what that details? So
You can give me a call tomorrow anytime, or anytime. It doesn't have to be tomorrow.
all right, and the other question, just to touch base on the last question that was asked. Most of the grass area that's outside my fence is pretty much the right of way, but I've been maintaining it as a grass property before, 15 years, and then my in-laws been doing it for 30 something 50 years. Is that going to be regrassed back when that tank is put in? And I'm sure that's a good spot where storage of materials is going to be. I've been investing in that part of it. Just want to make sure it's kind of put back to where it was found.
Yes, as part of the final cleanup of the project, there'll be some interim cleanup of areas as they're leaving different work areas, but when everything's done, we'll make sure that there's loam and seed put down for restoring grass areas that are disturbed, that are within the right of way, but part of someone's lawn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Bill, I would also just want to add to, and Jen, you kind of alluded to this, because we do have 2 construction seasons. I wouldn't want people to expect that Jamco is going to do complete site restoration this fall before winter, because they're going to be back in the neighborhood next year doing water and drainage on some streets that they've already done sewer on. So thank you, Jen, for pointing out that there will be some cleanup done at the end of this year, but the final cleanup and final restoration will take place next year.
Joe, if I can jump in real quick.
Sure.
So Bill, to hop on how Jamco as a company handles this type of work. Normally, after we've installed the utility, we do a general cleanup, like Joe had mentioned. We go out there, we'll clean up this fall. Obviously, by the time we probably get around to some of these houses, it will be far too late for any type of seeding. That will all be done at the end of the project, but it will not be, it'll be left passable and safe. And in a reasonable manner.
Thanks, Jamie.
Are there any other questions? As a reminder, if you don't have your questions tonight, but you think of them tomorrow or next week, again, feel free to reach out to Jen. She will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. You can visit our Facebook group or the town website in order to get some updates on where we're at with the project and what we are anticipating upcoming. But again, if you have any questions in the meantime, you can always reach out directly to Jen or myself, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Great. Well, if there is nothing else from the audience or from the project team, I think we can go enjoy our evening. Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we look forward to a successful project here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.